Michael Mancuso, ever heard of him? This was the man who murdered in cold blood the woman who served him faithfully for years, just like how Semion the brainy Don was loyal to the Russian government as they were to him. And then here's little Vic, suspected to be the deadliest of all, a mafia boss responsible for a bombing in Italy. To what end? Their messages were clear. They needed to prove that their cruelty knew no bounds. From their crimes, including racketeering, killings, holding the government by the balls, among others, it was crystal clear that nobody was safe. Not friends, not foes, and definitely not family. These are the mafia bosses you never knew are still active in 2024. Meet this guy, Semion Mogilevich, the brainy Don. With a mind sharp as a tack and a ruthlessness to match, Mogilevich has been described by even law enforcement as the most dangerous mobster in the world. The Ukraine native's criminal career spans decades, not to forget that his activities range from arms trafficking and contract murders to human trafficking and international prostitution rings. He is the epitome of a modern-day mafia boss, one who has successfully merged traditional criminal enterprises with the complexities of global finance. Mogilevich's reach into the corporate world is as impressive as it is terrifying. He has been linked to a multitude of companies, from energy firms to banks, using them as fronts for money laundering operations on a colossal scale. His ability to navigate the murky waters of international finance has allowed him to launder billions of dollars, securing his position within the upper echelons of the criminal hierarchy. The Russian mafia, under Mogilevich's guidance, operates with a level of sophistication that rivals any multinational corporation. Mogilevich himself is rumored to have significant political protection, which has allowed him to operate with relative impunity. Despite being on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, Mogilevich remains at large. He is believed to reside in Russia, where he continues to oversee his vast criminal empire. What's interesting is that the Russian government has shown little interest in extraditing him, and some speculate that his connections within the Kremlin are what keep him shielded from international law enforcement efforts. His reputation for violence is well known, with a trail of bodies left in the wake of his rise to power. He is not a man to be crossed lightly, and those who have attempted to stand in his way have often met with brutal ends. The world of Semion Mogilevich is one where the lines between legitimate business and criminal enterprise are blurred. His ability to operate in plain sight, to manipulate systems and people, makes him a particularly insidious threat. This next deadly mafia boss takes us to the Big Apple, New York. He is an enigmatic figure at the helm of the Bonanno family, the reputed current boss whose journey through the ranks shows power, betrayal, and survival. You guessed right, it's Michael Mancuso, Michael Mickey Scars Mancuso, the Gambino boss. This mafia boss has always been a magnet for trouble and violence. After serving a 10-year prison sentence for the second-degree murder of his wife, Evelina, Mancuso emerged from prison, hardened and thirsty for power. His criminal profile earned him induction into the Bonanno family, taking on the role of an enforcer. Consequently, his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of mob politics and his penchant for brutality saw him rise through the ranks. It wasn't long before he was promoted to captain, a position that afforded him more power and respect within the organization. As captain, Mancuso oversaw his crew with an iron fist, ensuring that the Bonanno family's interests were protected and that its enemies were dealt with swiftly. The streets whispered tales of Mancuso's exploits, and his nickname, Mikey Nose, became synonymous with fear and respect. His influence continued to grow, and he became a key player in the family's operations. From extortion rackets to illicit gambling dens, Mancuso's name was spoken in hushed tones, and those who crossed him often found themselves facing dire consequences. As the new millennium approached, the Bonanno family faced challenges from law enforcement and rival factions. Mancuso's leadership qualities did not go unnoticed, and when the acting boss of the family was arrested on racketeering and murder charges, it was Mancuso who was tapped to take the reins as acting boss. It was during this time that a grave decision was made, one that would once again cast Mancuso in a sinister light and reaffirm his reputation as a formidable leader. The year 2004 was marked by the murder of Randolph Pizzolo. It was Mancuso, acting on the orders of Vincent Basciano, who orchestrated this ruthless killing. Pizzolo, an associate deemed reckless and a liability, was shot to death on November 30th. The triggerman, a soldier, Anthony Ace Aiello, was merely the hand. Mancuso had pointed the finger. By 2008, Mancuso was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a sentence that would seem to many like the end of his reign. But the bars of a prison cell could not contain his influence. Even as he served time, his presence was felt within the Bonanno family. In 2013, while still incarcerated, Mancuso was named the new official boss of the Bonanno family. Upon his release in 2019, Mancuso wasted no time in restructuring the family. He shelved those who had opposed him, including the acting boss and his consigliere, who had attempted to undermine his authority. Mancuso appointed new acting bosses, ensuring that those who were loyal to him were in positions of power. Mancuso's approach to leadership was a delicate balancing act. He sought to revive traditional revenue streams such as loan sharking, gambling, and protection rackets, while also exploring new opportunities that could provide the family with a financial edge. His goal? Well, it was simply to ensure the Bonanno family's prosperity in an era where the old rules of organized crime no longer guaranteed success. But in 2020, Mancuso found himself once again on the wrong side of the law, arrested for violating the terms of his supervised release by associating with known criminals. This resulted in an 11-month prison sentence, a setback that highlighted the unstable nature of life at the top of a mafia family. As Mancuso serves his time, the future of the Bonanno family hangs in the balance. However, the same cannot be said of Robert Donofrio, a feared enforcer who rose to the top of the New York underworld and continues to roam free despite his propensity for violence. Little Robert Donofrio, the enforcer. The early 1990s bore witness to one of the most violent episodes in the history of the American Mafia, the Colombo family war. As the conflict raged, Little Robert Donofrio made a pivotal decision that would define his future within the organization. In 1991, he switched sides, aligning himself with the faction loyal to the official boss, Carmine Jr. Persico, a move that demonstrated both his strategic acumen and his understanding of the family's power dynamics. Donofrio's loyalty to the Persico faction did not come without its costs. He found himself embroiled in plots that sought to eliminate key figures of the rival Orena faction. Ironically, it was Victor, Little Vic Orena, who inducted Donofrio into the Colombo family. Sadly, the internal wranglings in the family now pitted the former friends against each other. According to an FBI report, Donofrio was part of a hit team that twice aimed to assassinate William Wild Bill Cudolo, a prominent member of the opposition. The first attempt, planned for Thanksgiving Day in 1991, involved a scheme as audacious as it was perilous. Hitmen disguised as Hasidic Jews, armed with machine guns and bulletproof vests, a plan ultimately aborted by the faction's leadership. In 1992, Donofrio's fate took a decisive turn when he, along with others, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. The court proceedings that followed painted a grave picture of the life he had chosen. Brooklyn federal judge I. Leo Glasser, recognizing the extent of the crimes yet the absence of actual murder, sentenced those convicted at trial to 13 years, and those who pleaded guilty, like Little Robert, to 8 years behind bars. Upon his release from prison in July 2000, Donofrio did not retreat into the shadows, but instead re-established himself within the family, and his connections to both the Persico and Orena factions positioned him as a unifying figure within the family. As the Colombo crime family faced the aftermath of a federal racketeering case that saw 14 guilty pleas, including that of the reputed boss-in-waiting, Theodore Skinny Teddy Persico, the stage was set for Little Robert's rise to acting boss. His appointment signaled a new chapter for the Colombos, one in which the lessons of the past would shape the strategies of the future. Even though he operates under the radar, Donofrio has absolute control over the family's business. He oversees the family's various rackets, from loan sharking and gambling to the more sophisticated realms of white-collar crime. His ability to adapt to the changing dynamics of the criminal world while maintaining the family's core operations speaks to his acumen as a leader. The respect Little Robert commands is evident in how he has managed to avoid legal entanglements that have ensnared other members of the mafia. This ability to evade the law's grasp while steering the family's course clearly indicates his savvy and discretion. Donofrio's influence is also reflected in the loyalty he inspires among his associates. His long-standing relationships within the family, including his ties to both the Persico and Orena factions, have allowed him to foster a sense of unity that has been elusive in the past. This unity has helped to shield the family from infiltration by undercover law enforcement agents, thereby ensuring Little Robert's continued reign and freedom. Italian mafia boss Domenico Cefalu is another name that comes to mind when you consider the tact that is required to evade capture despite being under the radar of law enforcement agencies for several years. Domenico, Italian Dom, Cefalu, the quiet Don Dominic. Cefalu's tale begins in the bustling streets of Palermo, Sicily. He was born into a world that would shape his destiny. In 1947, amid post-war Italy's struggles, Cefalu's life was set on a course that would lead him far from his homeland. Seeking the promise of opportunity, he crossed the ocean to the United States, where the shadows of organized crime soon enveloped him. As Cefalu settled into his new life, he found himself drawn into the Gambino crime family's expansive web. The Gambinos, a name synonymous with power and fear in the criminal underworld, were expanding expanding their empire, and heroin smuggling was their golden ticket. With his Sicilian roots and burgeoning ambition, Cefalu became a pivotal player in this dangerous game. Although Cefalu was sentenced to 6 years behind bars in 1982, it didn't contain his influence or sever his ties to the Gambino family. Upon his release from prison, Domenico Cefalu was formally inducted into the Gambino family as a made man in the 1990s, a badge of honor that marked his full acceptance into the fold. Under the tutelage of Captain Pasquale Conti, Cefalu honed his skills, proving himself to be a formidable operator within the Sicilian Zip crew. His influence spread through the boroughs of Queens and Brooklyn, where he orchestrated a variety of illicit activities, from loan sharking to gambling rings. Cefalu's ascent continued, and by 2005, he had reached the upper echelons of the family's power structure. Jackie D'Amico, the street boss and a former ally of the infamous John Gotti, recognized Cefalu's potential and appointed him as the family underboss. This role was not just a title, it was a mandate to oversee the operations of the Sicilian faction within the Gambino family, a task Cefalu undertook with a strategic mind and an iron fist. Living with his mother and maintaining a facade of legitimacy through his work at a bakery company, Cefalu's true power lay in the shadows. His influence and control over the family's operations grew, and with it, the respect he commanded among his peers. Then, in July 2011, the winds of change blew once more. With Peter Gotti behind bars, the Gambino family needed a leader who could steer them away from the pitfalls of their past. Cefalu was their answer. His appointment as the boss of the family was a return to the old ways, to the traditional style of mafia leadership that emphasized power consolidated under a single, unchallengeable boss. Domenico Cefalu's reign as the boss of the Gambino crime family marked a pivotal moment in the annals of organized crime. His leadership signified a return to the old guard, to a time when the word of the boss was the law and loyalty was the currency of power. His story, from the streets of Palermo to the pinnacle of one of America's most feared criminal organizations. As the sun sets on his chapter in the Gambino family's history, the echoes of his impact have been a constant in the world of organized crime. Now let's turn to the calculated boss, Liborio Bellomo. Liborio Barney Bellomo, the calculated boss. These bosses may be ruthless, but many calculations and strategies go on in their operations. Bellomo's rise within the Genovese ranks was nothing short of extraordinary. By the age of 20, he was ushered into the fold of La Cosa Nostra in a secretive induction ceremony. His sponsor, Vincent Caffaro, saw in him not just a protege, but a future leader, a man who could carry the family's torch into a new era. In the early 1980s, Bellomo took the helm of the 116th Street Crew, a faction of the family with its tentacles in various illicit activities, from illegal gambling to the dark underbelly of labor racketeering. The crew's influence permeated the New York City District Council of Carpenters, showcasing Bellomo's ability to manipulate and control labor unions to the family's advantage. Bellomo's approach to conducting mafia business was unconventional. Shunning the spotlight, he opted for a low profile, often meeting with fellow mobsters under the cover of night in secluded locations. His attire was unassuming, jeans and sweatshirts, nothing like the flashy suits typical of mobsters of his era. This penchant for discretion became a hallmark of his leadership style, allowing him to navigate the treacherous waters of organized crime with a degree of anonymity. Under Bellomo's stewardship, the Genovese family's influence in the construction industry burgeoned. He became the preeminent racketeer in the New York City District Council of Carpenters, wielding his power to shape the city's skyline. His reach extended to the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center, where he placed loyal crew members in key union positions, further solidifying his grip on the city's construction rackets. However, Bellomo's empire was not without its challenges. His ascent to power was marked by a series of brutal power plays, including a jurisdictional dispute with Little Italy captain Peter DeFeo. The outcome was a testament to Bellomo's strategic acumen, as he secured exclusive control over Bronx Carpenters Local 17, effectively removing DeFeo's influence and consolidating his own. The law, however, was watching. Bellomo's criminal activities had not gone unnoticed, and on June 11, 1996, he faced a litany of charges under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The indictment included allegations of murder, extortion, and labor racketeering, painting a picture of a man whose criminal reach was both broad and deep. The murders of mobsters Ralph D. Simone and Antonio Lorenzo, both suspected informants, were particularly damning, signaling the lengths to which Bellomo would go to protect the family's secrets. Despite his efforts to evade justice, including passing polygraph tests, Bellomo's fate was sealed. The weight of evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was compelled to strike a deal with prosecutors. He pled guilty to extortion extorting payoffs from a construction union and a garbage hauling company, a move that would see him sentenced to 10 years in prison. It was a significant blow to Bellomo and the Genovese family, but one that would not diminish his influence or the fear he instilled in both his associates and adversaries. Upon his release from prison on December 1, 2008, Liborio Bellomo stepped back into a world where the landscape of organized crime had shifted. Yet the Genovese crime family's operations continued to thrive under his alleged leadership. Bellomo's return to power was marked by a strategic consolidation of control and reaffirming his influence within the family's ranks. Victor Amuso is another man with little attached to his name, but his criminal enterprise is by far the opposite. Victor Little Vic Amuso, the ruthless leader. As the iron-fisted leader of the Lucchese crime family, Amuso's reign in the late 20th century marked one of the most ruthless chapters in the annals of the American Mafia. His story is woven with violence, power struggles, and an unyielding grip on the criminal underworld. As a young man, Amuso was drawn to the Lucchese crime family, one of the most powerful mafia organizations of the era. The family, under the leadership of Tommy Lucchese, was involved in a range of criminal activities, from loan sharking and gambling to extortion and murder. Amuso's ambition and ruthless disposition caught the eyes of the family's hierarchy, and he began his ascent through the ranks. The 1980s saw a seismic shift in the structure of the Lucchese family. With the death of boss Anthony Corallo, a power vacuum emerged. With his longtime associate and enforcer Anthony Gaspipe Casso, Amuso maneuvered through the family's internal politics with a mix of shrewdness and brutality. By the late 1980s, Amuso had risen to the pinnacle of power, becoming the boss of the Lucchese family. Victor Amuso's tenure as the boss of the Lucchese crime family was a period marked by a relentless pursuit of power and wealth, often at the expense of human life and societal order. His leadership style was authoritarian, and his criminal activities were diverse and far-reaching, affecting the lives of countless individuals both within and outside the sphere of organized crime. Under Amuso's command, the Lucchese family engaged in a myriad of criminal enterprises. One of the most lucrative was the Garment District racket, where the family exerted control over the trucking routes and labor unions. This allowed them to siphon off millions of dollars from the industry through extortion and kickbacks. The construction industry was another domain in which the Lucchese family's influence was felt. Through bid rigging and control of construction unions, they were able to secure contracts and manipulate the market to their advantage. However, Amuso's downfall began in the early 1990s, when law enforcement agencies armed with RICO statutes started to close in on the mafia. Several of Amuso's underlings were arrested, and the family's activities were under intense scrutiny. In 1991, Amuso himself became a fugitive after being indicted on multiple charges, including murder and racketeering. The net around Amuso tightened as his trusted enforcer, Anthony Gaspipe Casso, was captured. Casso, facing life in prison, turned informant and provided the government with damning evidence against Amuso. This betrayal from within his inner circle was a significant blow to Amuso's power and signaled the beginning of the end of his reign. After nearly a year on the run, Amuso was finally apprehended in Pennsylvania. His trial was a media spectacle, with revelations of the Lucchese family's criminal activities captivating the public. Amuso was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The impact of Victor Amuso's criminal empire was profound. The violence and corruption that marked his leadership had a ripple effect throughout society. Businesses suffered under the yoke of extortion, drugs ravaged communities, and the rule of law was challenged by the Lucchese family's brazen criminal acts. Amuso's downfall also marked a turning point in the fight against organized crime. His conviction, along with those of other mafia bosses like Matteo Messina Denaro, demonstrated the effectiveness of RICO laws and the determination of law enforcement to dismantle the power of the mafia. Matteo Messina Denaro, the playboy boss, dubbed diabolic. He is a man whose very mention sends shivers down the spine of even the most hardened criminals. Born in Castelvetrano, Sicily, Denaro is a fugitive, the last of the old guard of Cosa Nostra, and has been on the run since 1993. Despite his absence from the public eye, his influence has only grown, with tentacles reaching far beyond the picturesque landscapes of Sicily. Denaro's empire thrives on extortion, money laundering, and drug trafficking. Wealth and authority were rewards Denaro reaped in his criminal life. Until his later years, his net worth runs into hundreds of millions of euros, if not billions. However, the legend of Denaro is not just built on his criminal activities, but also on the blood that stains his hands. He is believed to be responsible for numerous murders, including the infamous bombings in Rome, Florence, and Milan in the early 1990s that claimed the lives of 10 people and left many more injured. These acts of terror were a brutal message to the Italian state, a demonstration of the mafia's reach and ruthlessness. In 2024, Denaro's influence extended across across continents. Reports suggest that his network collaborates with South American cartels to funnel cocaine into Europe, making the Mediterranean an entry point for narcotics that flood the streets of major cities. His operations also delve into legitimate businesses, from renewable energy to large-scale agriculture, laundering his illicit gains and further entrenching his power. The search for Denaro was a saga filled with false leads and near misses. For 3 decades, the Italian authorities, despite their best efforts, played a cat-and-mouse game with this cunning boss, until about a year ago when the law finally caught up with him. Through the chase, Denaro displayed an ability to blend into society and seemingly vanish into thin air, thereby frustrating law enforcement and only adding to his mythos. Denaro was not just a criminal, but a ghost haunting the halls of justice. The impact of Denaro's actions is not limited to the criminal world. It seeps into the everyday lives of citizens, influencing economies, politics, and the very fabric of society. The businesses under his hidden control affect market dynamics, while the fear he instills ensures silence and compliance. He is a man who, without ever being seen, can control the fate of thousands. From Europe's criminal underworld, we venture into the dense urban jungles of Tokyo, where we encounter a figure who commands respect and fear in equal measure within the Yakuza, Japan's notorious organized crime syndicate. This is Shinobu Tsukasa, also known as Kenichi Shinoda, the reputed godfather of the Yamaguchi-gumi, the largest Yakuza family in Japan. His reign over the criminal underworld of Japan is both enigmatic and iron-fisted. Shinobu Tsukasa. Tsukasa's rise to the top of the Yamaguchi-gumi is a tale of loyalty, violence, and strategic maneuvering within the complex hierarchy of the Yakuza. Under his leadership, the syndicate has expanded its traditional rackets, including gambling, extortion, and loan sharking, to more sophisticated ventures such as white-collar crime, stock market manipulation, and cybercrime. Under Tsukasa's guidance, the Yamaguchi-gumi has not only soiled itself into the criminal fabric of Japan, but has also extended its reach internationally. The syndicate is involved in drug trafficking, working in concert with Asian cartels to distribute narcotics worldwide. Their operations are shrouded in secrecy, and their members are bound by a strict code of conduct that demands absolute obedience and loyalty. Despite his notorious reputation, Tsukasa maintains a low profile, a strategy that has served him well in eluding law enforcement while continuing to oversee the Yamaguchi-gumi's operations. His leadership style is one of quiet intimidation and calculated moves, ensuring the syndicate's survival and prosperity in the face of crackdowns by Japanese authorities. The enigma of Shinobu Tsukasa and the Yamaguchi-gumi is a complex web of tradition, modernity, and criminal innovation. Their story is not just one of crime, it reflects the dark underbelly of society that continues to evolve and challenge the boundaries of law enforcement and international security. Domenico Oppedisano. Often overlooked in favor of the more notorious Sicilian mafia, the 'Ndrangheta under Oppedisano's rule has quietly become one of the most powerful and insidious criminal syndicates in the world. Oppedisano, known for his strategic mind and ruthless efficiency, has overseen the 'Ndrangheta's expansion into international drug trafficking, becoming one of the world's largest importers of cocaine. With a global network that spans from South America to Europe, the 'Ndrangheta has outpaced other Italian crime groups, establishing itself as a dominant force in the global narcotics market. The 'Ndrangheta's structure is unique, with a complex hierarchy that operates on familial ties and blood oaths, making it incredibly difficult for law enforcement to infiltrate. Oppedisano, as the capo crimine, wields immense power, presiding over the syndicate's activities with an iron fist. His ability to maintain unity among the 'Ndrangheta's clans has been crucial to the organization's stability and growth. Under Oppedisano's leadership, the 'Ndrangheta has diversified its criminal portfolio, engaging in money laundering, arms trafficking, and even high-stakes financial crime. They have infiltrated legitimate businesses, including the construction and hospitality industries, using them as fronts for their criminal operations. The 'Ndrangheta's influence extends into politics, with allegations of corrupting public officials to protect their interests. Nevertheless, Oppedisano's reign has not been without its challenges. The Italian government has launched numerous operations to combat the 'Ndrangheta's influence, resulting in significant arrests and seizures. But the syndicate's decentralized nature and Oppedisano's strategic acumen have allowed them to weather these storms and continue their illicit activities largely unscathed. And the impact of 'Ndrangheta's criminal activities on society has been profound. Their criminal activities have a corrosive effect on the rule of law, undermining trust in public institutions and fueling a cycle of violence and corruption. The wealth accumulated through their operations has given them a level of power that rivals that of the state, challenging the very foundations of Italian democracy. Sammy Gravano is another modern mafia boss who mastered the art of loyalty and mafia-like treason. Sammy Gravano, the Bull. He is one of the few names that have stirred intrigue and horror. Known as the Bull, Gravano's life reads like a crime thriller, from a scrappy Brooklyn kid to a feared underboss in the notorious Gambino crime family. He committed murders as a young adult and went on to become one of the most infamous government witnesses in history, bringing down the Teflon Don, John Gotti. This is the tale of betrayal, power, and a man who walked the razor's edge between loyalty and survival. As the son of hardworking Italian immigrants, Gravano was baptized into a life of hardship, where respect is earned through fists and fear. As a young boy, his fists did the talking, and he soon became known as Sammy the Bull. Soon he crossed paths with the Colombo crime family, where he cut his teeth in the world of organized crime, running errands and proving his loyalty. But it was with the Gambino crime family, one of the 5 families that dominated New York's organized crime scene, that Gravano would find his true calling. Under the tutelage of mob bosses like Carlo Gambino and later Paul Castellano, Gravano's reputation as a ruthless and efficient earner grew. He was involved in loan sharking, hijacking, and extortion, but it was in the construction industry that Gravano truly made his mark, using intimidation and mob connections to secure lucrative contracts and control labor unions. Soon, he became a fully initiated member of the Mafia, and with this came the responsibility of carrying out the family's dirty work. Eventually, with the assassination of Paul Castellano, the Mafia's former boss outside Sparks Steakhouse, Gotti rose to power, and Gravano was right by his side, promoted to underboss, the second in command of the Gambino family. The media dubbed Gotti the Teflon Don for his ability to avoid convictions, but it was Gravano's shrewdness and brutality that helped solidify their reign. Soon, the empire that Sammy Gravano helped build was as formidable as it was feared, yet the foundations of this criminal colossus were more fragile than they appeared. By the early 1990s, the winds of change were blowing through the streets of New York, carrying with them the whispers of betrayal that would shake the Gambino family to its core. Gravano's world began to crumble when the law finally caught up with the Teflon Don. John Gotti, along with Gravano and other high-ranking members of the family, were arrested on charges ranging from murder to racketeering. For Gravano, the prospect of life in prison loomed large, a grim reward for his years of loyal service to the Mafia. Faced with the damning tapes of Gotti speaking ill of him and the bleak reality of spending the rest of his days behind bars, Gravano made a decision that would forever alter the course of organized crime history. In a move that stunned both law enforcement and the Mafia, Gravano agreed to become a government witness, turning his back on the omerta, the sacred code of silence that had governed his life. Gravano's cooperation was a treasure trove for the government. His insider knowledge of the inner workings of the Gambino family was unparalleled. He knew where the bodies were buried, both literally and figuratively. His testimony was the linchpin in the government's case against Gotti and the other defendants. With the precision of a surgeon, Gravano laid bare the structure, operations, and violent history of the Gambino family, implicating his former associates in a series of crimes that had long been shrouded in mystery. The trial was a media circus, with every revelation from Gravano's lips making headlines across the country. In the end, Gotti received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, effectively ending the reign of the Teflon Don. However, Gravano's actions were not without consequences, as the Mafia never forgave, and the price on his head showed the depth of the betrayal felt by his former brothers in arms. Gravano's family was forced to live with the stigma and danger associated with his cooperation. The man who had once been a respected and feared mobster was now a pariah, living in the shadows, constantly looking over his shoulder. The Bull had gored the Mafia, and nothing would be the same again. Sammy Gravano, Domenico Oppedisano, Shinobu Tsukasa, Matteo Messina Denaro, Victor Amuso, Liborio Bellomo, Domenico Cefalu, Robert Donofrio, Michael Mancuso, Semion Mogilevich. They may be the deadliest of them all, but these mafia bosses had one thing in common. They never analyzed their lives behind bars. In fact, they were certain their script would always go according to plan. The video further highlights the challenges faced by governments worldwide in combating the scourge of narcotics and the evolving tactics of the criminal underworld. If you enjoyed this video and would like more updates on what's new at the crime scene, click on the card showing on your screen.